G'day F1 fans, the Australian Grand Prix. Well, perhaps it gave us the first real answer of the 2026 season. And that answer is currently pretty clear. George Russell took his sixth career win, Kimi Antonelli backed it up with a P2, Mercedes won 2, and Ferrari, well, I think they're pretty happy, but I bet they believe they probably could have squeezed a little bit more out of that Melbourne result. And after all the talk of testing, all the questions about the new regulations, new aero, energy management, and how the cars would actually race wheel to wheel, well, I think the early signs are pretty good. The season could be quite interesting. Now, before we get into it, my sidekick, Mick, unfortunately, he can't join me today. As some of you know, that we are currently based in the Middle East and things are, well, they're quite hectic here at the moment. All is good. He will be back joining me for the Chinese Grand Prix preview later this week. Now, before we get started, obviously, new regulations, there was a lot of anticipation. I just want to throw a question out to all you F1 fans. After what you saw in Melbourne, are you encouraged by these new regulations? Do you think we're heading for better racing this season, or is it just still too early to tell after one race weekend? For me, I think Melbourne, it's a pretty promising start. Well, let's get into it. Let's break down the teams one by one. And, well, we've got to start off with Mercedes. 1, 2, they are the big winners. Maximum points. Now, George Russell was outstanding all weekend. This is exactly why so many people see him as a genuine title favourite for this year. He looked calm, composed, in control. Even when things weren't perfect, he never looked rattled. He didn't get the cleanest launch. Leclerc did get him at the start, which gave us a bit of excitement early on, particularly those first 10 laps. But after that, George just looked like a driver who knew exactly what race he needed to run. And that's what, of course, impressed me the most. It was typical Mercedes, got the strategy right when needed. There's no panic, no unnecessary risk, just controlled high-level driving. And to Mercedes' credit, again, they just do what they do. They stay composed, make the right calls, and they just get themselves into great positions strategically most of the time. That first virtual safety car was important. Mercedes handled it well. So Russell, he gets the big dub, 25 points, massive statement win. On the other side of the garage, Kimi Antonelli also deserves a lot of credit. I thought he was very, very strong all weekend. And yeah, there were some mistakes, bit scruffy. P3 had the big accident. Lucky to get the car in time for Q1. But when the pressure came on, he delivered. He got the lap that mattered and secured the front row start. And, well, he went on and backed it up in the race. Yeah, it wasn't the greatest start, but he got the result. And for a young driver in just his second season, that is the sort of performance that gives the team a lot of confidence. So realistically, on the face of it, Mercedes leave Melbourne, maximum points, 1-2 finish. It was strong pace, good strategy, 2 drivers who look capable of delivering. And realistically, that's about as good as you can get for a start of a brand new season. Now, on to Ferrari. Now, on paper, 3rd for Charles Leclerc and 4th for Lewis Hamilton. It's not a disaster, but I do truly believe Ferrari will feel there was more on the table. There was a moment in the race where, I felt they could have been potentially a bit more aggressive with strategy around the virtual safety cars. It looked like they had an opportunity to split the strategy, which Hamilton, he lamented that on the radio, that he couldn't believe that, they kept them on the same strategy. And that's probably what will frustrate Ferrari fans because the pace looked real. And I think that's the key takeaway for me. Ferrari did not look miles off Mercedes. And in fact, at certain points, they possibly looked like they were definitely in the fight. Their pace was decent. Their starts looked strong. What rocket ships off the start. And they never looked out of contention. So while the final result may feel slightly underwhelming, I actually think Ferrari leave Australia with a lot of confidence. There's definitely pace in that car. And perhaps if they clean up a few of those decision-making typical Ferrari moments, this could have actually been a proper fight between Ferrari and Mercedes at the front right to the very end. But I also think Ferrari starts, they're worth watching. We saw hints of that in testing again in Melbourne, absolute rockets off the line. So maybe pole position on the Saturday isn't that important if they keep launching the car like that. Overall, Ferrari, look, they're in the mix. they're close, they're competitive. If you're a Ferrari fan, you should be extremely optimistic and pretty happy with the way things are going. Now to McLaren, I'd say it's a pretty disappointing weekend. We've got Oscar Piastri's home race, ending before it really got going. That was obviously a huge letdown for the Aussie fans. That's not how he would have wanted to start his season, and definitely not how he wanted his home Grand Prix to unfold. That was a big blow to the local crowd, no doubt. But on the other side, Lando Norris, he did salvage something with a 5th place. Look, they went quite aggressive with the strategy, 2-stopper for Lando, and to be fair, he did do a good job holding on to that position, particularly with a charging Max Verstappen right behind him at the end of the race. But if I've been honest, McLaren didn't quite look in the same conversation as Mercedes and Ferrari this weekend. Now, it's easy to sort of go, this is going to be the pecking order for the rest of the year. Clearly, it is extremely early. It could be track specific. There's going to be a lot of changes coming up over the next few races. But based on Melbourne alone, they were not quite where I think they would have wanted to be. Not a disaster, definitely not ideal either. Now, Red Bull had one of those strange weekends. Let's start off with Isaac Hadjar. First race for Red Bull, big one. He was one of the big positives of the weekend right up until the race, and then it went wrong. The qualifying performances was excellent, and it really felt like a breakout result was there for him. That would have been a massive step, but the race day ended early with a technical issue, and that became one of the key moments in the strategy story. So Hadjar was both one of the Saturday stars and then one of the pivotal names in Sunday's race. Then on the other side, Max Verstappen had that Q1 issue. Look, going into turn 1, flat out, rear lockup, straight off. But, I mean, what could he do? Is basically a passenger at that point. Look, he recovered pretty well, drove aggressively in the race, got the car back up to 6 from a P20 start. So good recovery, typical Max Verstappen race. But Red Bull, they're intriguing me because I don't think we've seen their true level yet. Hadjar's performance was, look, it was good, but we haven't seen Max nail qualifying, one-lap stuff. So perhaps there is a bit more pace in that car. But let's see how it pans out over the next few races. And I think that is one of the big stories heading into China. Red Bull, for me, still a bit of a mystery, to be honest. Now, Haas, I think they'll be one of the happiest teams leaving Melbourne. Ollie Behrman, mate, he just keeps getting it done. 7th is a fantastic drive, proper drive. He started outside the 10. Behrman, he deserves a lot of credit for what he is doing. But it's hard to ignore him. It's really hard to ignore him in just his second season. And then on the other side, you've got Esteban Ocon, only could manage 11th. But again, Behrman, his younger teammate, has gotten the better of him once again. And if Behrman keeps beating him or putting in these type of performances, mate, it's not going to look so good for Esteban Ocon this year. Now, Haas, perhaps they're not spectacular over the one-lap pace when we look at what they did in qualifying. Both cars were outside the top 10, but a good drive there for Ollie Behrman. And again, like I said, Haas leaving Melbourne very happy. Racing Bulls. Now, honestly, I was pretty encouraged by what I saw with the Racing Bulls pretty much the whole weekend. I've got to give a shout out to the rookie, Arvin Lindblad, because he was on point, straight out of the box. In fact, he probably had the better of Liam Lawson over the practice sessions and just looked a tad faster. And it was good to see because Racing Bulls, to me, they were a bit of a slight worry because testing, they just didn't seem to be in that sort of best of the midfield pack. They definitely felt like more towards the rear, but they definitely showed some pretty good pace this weekend. Now, Liam Lawson, good job, qualified 8th. Obviously, Lindblad qualified 9th there. Got the job done in qualifying, which is what he needs to be doing this year because that was always a bit of his Achilles last year. But unfortunately, mate, let's talk about that race start. bogged down. So it basically went from, I think it was P8 all the way to plumb last, probably before the first turn, to be honest, or around the first turn. And basically that was his race wrapped up. He could only recover back to, I think it was 13th. But how close was Franco Colapinto hitting him at the race start? So big props to Franco Colapinto, mate. That was some pretty impressive reaction. So let's go, Liam. Good weekend overall, just not nailing that start. So hopefully next time out in China, he definitely takes a step up there. But Arvin Lindblad, hats off to the young lad. I mean, first race in the points. So he looks like he belongs. He was very punchy, aggressive when he needed to be, and particularly at the start of the race. And he definitely did not look like a deer stuck in headlights, mate. He definitely belongs. So I think from Racing Bull's perspective, very happy with Lindblad, very happy with both regarding qualifying. But it was, again, one of those races where they just didn't capitalize on getting two drivers in the points, which realistically should have happened. So they'll be looking to make amends for that come China. Now, on to Audi, one of the new teams, and I think they'll be pretty happy with the start. Look, they've claimed their first points. Gabriel Bortoleto scoring points on debut for Audi is a very nice way to open the new chapter. Qualifying wasn't too bad, actually. We had Gabby P10, Hulkenberg just outside P11. Perhaps some reliability issues over there at Audi, which possibly is a bit of a concern. If you look at Gabriel Bortoleto, end of Q2, after securing a top 10 to get into Q3, unfortunately he had the car issue, so he couldn't partake in Q3. And Hulkenberg lining up on the grid, and, well, they had to shuffle him out before the race starts. So not ideal on that side of things. So hopefully these are those sort of early problems that is pretty typical at the beginning of a new, you could say, engine regulation cycle, but even just a new season start. So hopefully Audi can get on top of that. I'm pretty sure they can, but I think they'll be pretty happy just to secure some points. Now to Alpine, and to be honest, I expected a bit more from Alpine. This was one of my big misses heading into the weekend. I thought they were going to be a whole lot more competitive than they were. In qualifying, they just didn't really quite show any pace. And overall, it felt like a slightly underwhelming weekend. Now, Pierre Gasly, he did just typical Pierre Gasly things. Much like last year, he did do well in the race and he rescued a solitary point, finishing in P10. But I think Alpine, they were in it to definitely be a bit higher. When you look back at testing, they looked pretty competitive in the Bahrain testing. We know what their strategy was last year. They wrote off 2025, put all focus into this year, and obviously a lot of confidence in that Mercedes power unit. So definitely want to watch improve over the opening races of the season, but I think they'll be pretty disappointed walking away with one solitary point. Now, Franco Colapinto, we know just how important the season is going to be for him. It's extremely important that he gets off on the right foot as soon as possible. And it just didn't really come together for him this weekend. Now, he got that penalty at the start of the race. I think it was a start grid infringement or something along the line. So quite early he was hit with a penalty, stop go. So naturally that ruins your race pretty damn quickly. As I mentioned before, he did a pretty good job with some quick reactions, saving himself and saving Liam from running up the back of Lawson's car when he bogged it down. But yeah, not an ideal start for Franco. I think he needs some big races extremely soon because the pressure will pile up over there. So I think for Alpine, yes, they'll be happy that they walk away with a point, but they will be walking away from Melbourne with, I think, more questions. Again, maybe it was track specific. maybe they'll look much better in China. But for now, I would say it's a pretty disappointing start. Now, speaking of disappointing, that is Williams for me. From the midfield perspective, it was a disappointing weekend. When you compare where they were last year to where they are now under the new regulations, they just seem to be one of the teams that has probably taken the biggest step backwards. Okay, Aston Martin is number one there, but they are one of the other main teams that definitely have taken a step back. Now, Carlos Sainz, he had a rough weekend. I think Alex Albon, he did what he could. He maximised what he could. But overall, the pace just simply isn't there for Williams. Now, the good news is they all know what the problem is. Chonky car, got to get the weight off. The bad news is those problems they're not always easy to fix quickly. So while they may improve, I'm not expecting a dramatic turnaround immediately in China. I'm sure it's going to take a few few race weekends to bring in the upgrades and obviously try and pull some weight off the car. Now, they definitely look like a team as of right now with a fair bit of work to do. Now, onto the brand new team, Cadillac. Now, look, what we got at Melbourne was what I think the majority of us expected. And, that was to be down the back somewhere. We know the car is currently lacking pace. But for them, it was a massive milestone. This was a massive operation, ground-up operation, fresh. To get to this point, I think Graham Loudon and the team will be pretty damn happy getting the first race under the belt. It was also really cool to see Bottas and Perez back on the grid. Perez reacquainting himself with Liam Lawson with some good wheel banging action. But yeah, it's going to be a journey for Cadillac this year. It's all about learning, improving, getting the reliability right, and moving forward. So currently, raw pace far down, will be perennial backmarkers for probably most of the season. But hopefully, they can just eke performance week to week, bring in upgrades efficiently, and head in the right direction. And I think that will be essentially the master plan for Cadillac for the rest of the year. We had to get to them, and unfortunately, lucky last, Aston Martin. No surprises here, absolutely none. We knew testing had been difficult. Basically, the issues with the Honda power unit. Now there's been a lot of talk about massive vibrations. In fact, just a day or two before the race, there was talk that they weren't going to be able to finish the race due to these vibrations, and that I think it was Fernando Alonso, I think he said that he could only get through 25 laps. I think it was Stroll about 15. Look, there's no competitiveness in that car as of now. I think this weekend was seen as more of an extended test session, so to speak. I mean, Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll were basically gathering data, logging laps where they could. There was a time when I think it was Fernando Alonso came in quite early, boxed the car, went into the garage, and we thought, okay, their day is done. And then after a few laps, he came back out, knocked off a few more laps. So clearly trying to gather as much data as they can, trying to understand the package. They're definitely not where they want to be. Definitely not at this point in time, perhaps the biggest disappointment of the season. The problems look extremely deep, and I don't think this is going to be an easy one for them to dig themselves out of. So if you are an Aston Martin fan or an Alonso fan or a Stroll fan, I think you're going to have a lot of patience because, that is a massive hole to get out of. Unfortunately, though, I do worry for Fernando Alonso. Look, double world champion, multiple race winner. Last year, I think it might have been in the preview, but regardless, whenever it was, I was really hopeful that Aston Martin could be competitive and we could see Fernando Alonso fighting near the front one last time before he hangs up his Formula One racing gloves. But, mate, he may even just hang them up halfway through the season if this season just continues to be super difficult. So, final thoughts. Summing up the Australian Grand Prix in one sentence, I would probably, I'm just going to state the obvious, the new era is here. But for Mercedes currently are the team that have hit the ground running in this new regulation era. Although, in saying that, I don't think Ferrari is too far away. The midfield, again, it looks pretty tight. As a Racing Bulls fan, I was very pleasantly surprised that they seem to be best of the rest. Haas had a good weekend. Red Bull, I still think there's a question mark over their true performance. I don't think we've quite seen it yet. McLaren, out of the big four, will be the most disappointed, I would say, particularly, going into trying to three-peat the constructors. Obviously, Lando Norris's driving title defense. Got the McLaren unit, they got the Mercedes unit in the back, but you can't count them out with regards to what they could bring out through the season. So one race I guess you can't take too much away from it, but that's the exciting part, right? Because the first few rounds of this new regulation cycle are going to be quite dramatic. I think teams are going to improve quite fast. Upgrades will probably come quite quickly, and the pecking order could shift in a hurry or at least close up. So, yes, Mercedes leave Melbourne in the best position, maximum points, but the season is far from settled. I know there's a lot of Mercedes fans out there thinking this is an absolute lock-in at this point. But I'd be confident, yes, but things could change pretty quickly. So I think that wraps it up. Mick should be back for the Chinese Grand Prix preview, which we will record probably tomorrow. Get that out in the next couple of days. It's good that we've got back-to-back race weekends. I'm looking forward to it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Did Melbourne encourage you about these new regulations? Do you think we're heading in for better racing this season? And which team surprised you the most this weekend? Until then, enjoy having Formula One back. I'm glad it's back. And we'll catch you on the next one. Catch ya.